Hello and welcome back to CQ Live at Sydney Summit 2019. We're here to help you get prepped for your next certification. Once again with me today, I've got the fabulous Maria with me, our security expert, SA here at AWS, and we're going to be talking once again about the security specialty exam. So a bit different for this afternoon, guys. We do have some giveaways going on today, so please, if you also type your answers in the chat, our moderators will be giving you some surprises later. So please feel free
Sounds awesome.
to play along with us.
Participate in that.
No, Maria, you can't do it. Ready?
Yes.
Also, we've got John, so please vote along with us.
I'm hoping for your help, John.
All right, question 1, Amazon S3.
Okay.
Your company must retain legacy compliance data for 5 years in an immutable form in the unlikely event of a tax audit. Our favorite thing.
Yes.
What is the most cost-effective method that will achieve compliance?
Okay, so there are quite a few things in this question, quite a lengthy one and difficult to pronounce.
I love those ones.
I'm sure you do. So what do we have here? We've got a company that is legally obliged to keep content for 5 years, and it must be in the form that is immutable, meaning it can't be changed. So what do? And how can we do it in the most cost-effective way?
Yep.
Let's have a look at the options. Because we're looking at the most cost-effective way, immediately I will be looking for the options with deep archive and Glacier, because this is the most cost-effective deep storage, cold storage. So what options do we have with that? So we've got S3 infrequent access with bucket lock activated, which is not the most cost-effective, and by the way, bucket lock doesn't really exist. It's an object lock. So we eliminated that one.
Yep.
So let's have a look at the other ones, and there is one with S3 Deep Archive with legal hold, and I think, John, you have some legal background. Why don't you help me with that one?
So,
is there anything you don't do, John?
I can take care of your tax audit as well if you wish. I can make this problem go away.
Yeah.
How's that?
Talk us through it.
We've had various locking capabilities for a while. We've had Glacier, which has had Vault Lock for a while, which I see coming up to another answer. We recently introduced 2 new things with S3, and one is an object lock, which is the ability to lock away objects for a period of time, so you can't delete them, which is really, really good. And another one, which is a legal hold. And the legal hold allows somebody to come along and say, we've got a query about this, don't let anyone delete it, but then you can take away that legal hold whenever you want. So it's a temporary lock.
Okay.
So in this case, legal hold is probably not good for guaranteed immutability because somebody can turn off that lock.
Thanks,
So
John.
no 5 years guaranteed. It's
No.
until you remove it.
So close, but no.
Yep.
What do we think of 3, Maria?
3 sounds like a valid answer. It's certainly very cost effective, and Vault Lock could be set up for 5 years. Let's have a look what we have on the poll. What do people think?
Number 3, but number 4 is in the lead at the moment.
Number
Everyone
4
likes
is in the
Glacier.
lead. So
Another
a
Glacier.
number
Do you want to
4,
give us a
another
snippet about
Yep.
Glacier? Is that all right?
So Glacier is our cold storage. It's the when you can create a vault and transfer your archive files for long-term storage. So it's not designed for frequently accessed data, but in our questions, it's not what we want. It's unlikely event of the audit. So Glacier is a really good example of it's very good use case for that. So why are we not happy with IAM permissions to edit and delete objects set to deny?
Why indeed, Maria?
Why indeed? So, well, first of all, this is something that could be changed.
Yes.
So 5 years not
Makes
going to
sense.
work. Secondly, Glacier is something that where you don't really use for editing or delete or changing objects. You upload files in there and you leave them until you need them 5 years later. So this is certainly not an answer that would fit the requirements of the question.
So we're going with?
I would go with 3. With John's
3.
help.
So before I reveal the answer, you got a couple of seconds to get your answers in on the online chat. Remember, we're giving away a few surprises this afternoon. John, ready?
Voting is closed.
Close for question 1, and the answer is indeed 3.
Glacier.
Thank you, Maria. Always good when our expert gets it right. Question 2, access authentication. Ready?
Let's see.
Another long one. Give me a sec.
Yeah.
You have valuable media files hosted on AWS and want them to be served only to authenticated users of your web application. You are concerned that your content could be stolen and distributed for free. How can
not
you
a good thing.
protect that content, Maria?
Let's look into
I like this one.
scenario. So what do we have here? We have an application, a web application, and you have
Yeah.
several users that log in into that application to potentially access your media files, and you don't want them to be distributed without a user first authenticating. So I would like to point out, before we go through all the answers, is that authenticating into the web application does not mean authenticating onto AWS.
Okay.
So we're not talking about IAM users, we're talking about users within that particular web app.
So a significant differentiation
Yes.
there. Okay.
So let's have a look at which answers we could eliminate just because of that. First option, encrypt the content with user-specific KMS keys. I mean, first of all, user-specific, no IAM users, how are we going to do that? Secondly, it's not a very implementable solution.
Yeah.
If you have 100 users, and what are you going to encrypt each file with 100 different keys for different users to access them? Doesn't sound very logical or even common sense to do so.
Get
So
rid of that
second option is generate pre-signed URLs for content in the web application.
What is a
And
pre-signed URL?
Pre-signed URL is a URL with a specific special secret in it, that when you have that URL, you can access the object that it refers to.
Okay.
And usually with pre-signed URL, you can set up an expiry
Yes.
time, meaning that you allow limited access to the the person who's got the URL to access that object. So this is a classic example of pre-signed URL usage for web applications where you need to protect the content from unauthorized access.
So sounding pretty good at this
Sounds
point.
pretty good. What do you think, John?
I should say 100% of our viewers agree with that idea, but
Oh,
let's
that's good.
continue anyway.
Let's quickly wrap
Yep.
up
Never
3 and
know.
4. Get
So-
a bit of info there.
3, attach appropriate IAM policy to each IAM user. Again, as I mentioned, authentication into the web application doesn't mean I'm authenticating into our AWS platform. So
Perfect.
what
Simple
IAM
enough.
user I am. Use
Can't
key
be
pairs to only allow authenticated users to access content. Key pairs generally used for accessing EC2 instances, so not a really great example.
So
of
lock it
where-
into.
Lock it
John, a
into.
couple of seconds on the poll for people to get their
There, no
answers
question.
in.
Everyone's saying two.
Everyone agrees with you today.
Okay, pretty easy.
Number
Let's
2
move
it
to the
is. Let's move
next
on to
one.
question 3. KMS encryption. Ready?
My favorite subject.
Here we go. You are trying to decrypt ciphertext with AWS KMS, and the decryption operation is failing.
Uh-oh.
Which important note. Which of the following are possible causes? And Maria, I'm looking for 2 answers
So
here.
2 answers, folks. Type a number that matches the 2 letters shown on your screen. So
Do you just want to talk through the answering the poll?
they'll
The poll?
figure it out. We're looking
Okay.
for the number that matches the 2 letters.
John's got it.
Okay.
Over to you, Maria.
So we've got quite a few interesting terms here. Ciphertext. So ciphertext is a plain
I got it
text
right?
that
I pronounced
yes,
it right?
Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
good,
So
good.
ciphertext is something it's a plain text that's been encrypted. That's as simple as that. So, and we used, as the question states, we used KMS to encrypt it earlier. So what we're trying to do is we're trying now to decrypt that back into the plain text, and it's not working. So the options, the private key does not match the public key in the ciphertext. Now, in the context of KMS, we talk about master key and the data key, so it doesn't quite sound right,
Okay.
the answer. So, and we use master key to create data key and then use the data key to then encrypt the plain text. And it's called envelope encryption. So the next option is the plain text was encrypted along with an encryption context, and you are not providing the identical encryption context when calling the decrypt API.
Oh.
See, it's hard when you get a long
Oh, yeah.
sentence, Maria.
So, what are we doing here? A little bit about the encryption context. So it's an optional thing that you can do, but what it allows you to do is to introduce an additional layer of
Yeah.
security when encrypting, meaning that when you encrypt plain text, you can supply a string that's called a context, And then in order to decrypt it, you also need to supply exact same string, which makes it one level more secure. So, and if you don't know that string, then you won't be able to decrypt it. And so the option B sounds correct. Even though it's an optional parameter in the encrypt-decrypt process, if there was a context before, then it must be supplied in order to decrypt it. So it's quite possible that it's failing because of that.
So we need to find our second answer, Maria.
Okay, so it's either ciphertext you are trying to decrypt is not valid, or you are not providing the correct symmetric key to the decrypt API. Now, the trick with decrypting is when you decrypt, you technically don't need to supply the key. You do when you encrypt. But when you encrypt an object, information about the data key is stored together with the object itself. So when you go through the decrypt operation, you don't technically need to supply it. So I would eliminate number 4D, which leaves us with the ciphertext you're trying to decrypt is not valid, which could be quite a valid option, because if you just send a random blob, which is one of the parameters when you go through decrypt operation, if you just send a random string, then it can't decrypt it.
Yeah.
So I would go for B and C.
B and C, which maps to number 2, and our viewers at home, 44% have chosen
Only
number 2.
just favouring it. Let's reveal. B and C it is. All right.
But
Also,
I must say it was much easier than, what was the other question that everyone got right?
And I'll just call out Swords and Johan, who have run a prize for their participation so far.
Oh, fantastic. Prize already won. All right. We got only a couple of minutes left. Let's zoom through one more question. All right, Maria? A database security group controls network access to a database instance that is inside a VPC, allows default access from where?
We can go through this very quickly,
Awesome.
because all you need to know about security on AWS is that we design everything to be secure by definition, by default. Where if you don't need to do if you don't do anything, it will be private and isolated by default, which makes me think that the correct answer would be something along the lines of nobody has access to anything. Let's have a look at the options. Access from any IP address for the standard ports that the database uses is provided by default. So access from any IP addresses for the standard ports doesn't sound like very secure to me.
Nope.
The next option is access from any IP address for any port is provided by default. Again, not a very secure option. So let's go to the next one. No access, well, sounds promising. No access is provided by default, and any access must be explicitly added with a rule to the DB security group. I will go for that one.
Don't even want to look at the next one.
Well, the next one is access for the database connection string is provided by default in the DB security group.
So one question for you. This is talking about DB security groups. Does the same thing apply for EC2 security groups?
Absolutely. So when you create security groups, you add explicitly what access you would like to allow. And security groups, as you know, is a stateful firewall where you can add certain IP addresses to come in on certain ports into your VPC or onto your, network interfaces.
Okay, so we have practically everyone voting for 3, and the answer is
the reveal is
3.
C. Guys, thank you so much for joining us once again at CQ Live at Summit. Up next, we've got a very special guest for us, our MD of Australia. Can't believe to have him. No?
No?
Okay, good. Okay. We do. He's coming. He's coming. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank